Mathor is going to teach us. Teach us.
Okay, so what's that, Arthur?
I'm putting myself on mute because I got background noise. They're watching TV.
Okay, so it's Shavuot. So they say 38 days before the Chag, one should learn the halachot. And I actually heard a shir at the base, Rabbi Daryl Froome, who was standing in for Aaron Zilberg. Shavuot has only got 1 or 2 pages in the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, whereas the halachas of Pesach has 200 pages. So basically, there's only a couple of things here. Damon, stop me if I go over the time. So
we've got all the time in the world if you're putting into it.
Says here, eating a meal on Erev Yom Tov. One should refrain from eating a large meal on Erev Yom Tov in order to eat the Yom Tov meal with an appetite. It is best not to eat a meal in the late afternoon, even if the meal is not elaborate. In all instances, one should not eat meat on Erev Yom Tov. Okay, that I never knew. Okay, candle lighting. To recite the bracha before lighting the candles. And the bracha of Shechianu, there's no requirement to recite the bracha of Shechianu in conjunction with Kiddush. However, in Eruvim, page 40b, it states that the significance of the bracha is enhanced when it is recited in conjunction with Kiddush, and common practice is to act accordingly. Rav Yaakov Emden said that women should not recite Shechianu in lighting Yom Tov candles, but should instead wait until Kiddush, which we've all, I'm sure, experienced. The Balabait has said the Shechianu at Kiddush. Okay, let's move on here. Okay, the Shavuot meal. Okay, actually, sorry, Yotzat light. One should ideally light a Yotzat candle on Erev Yom Tov. And not, it says here, not on the second day, in honor of Yizkor. Sorry about it. One should not light a candle on Yom Tov, because it views it as a ner shel avtala, a candle whose light does not provide the benefit on Yom Tov, and as such it should not be lit. Okay, the meal on Shavuot, well, it applies first day in South Africa. People eat a dairy meal. That, notwithstanding the custom to wait 6 hours after eating meat, Rav Savarechik said that, okay, let's talk about American cheese. And then it's, so that's the first day, eating a dairy meal. Second day, you can have a meat meal. It's usually that's how it's done. And staying up all night, it's very admirable, very good thing to do. If one stays up at night and participates in a tikkun leil, common practice, if you haven't gone to sleep or fallen asleep, is to wash one's hands without a bracha. However, if one uses the bathroom prior to washing, one may recite Al Netilat Yadayim. Okay, let's continue next time.
I want to say 2 things in what Rav Kevin said, and it's very good. Is that the first thing that you guys have to pay attention as far as Shavuot is concerned, is that it is a minhag to learn all night, and it's the raisa to get up for Shachrit and Musaf. So, I know a lot of rabbis that do Keitzatzot, which means they learn maybe until 1 o'clock in the morning, 12:30, 1, where they fulfill the obligation of learning past midnight. And that is to correct the sin where the Jewish people, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Kevin, didn't get up in time for the giving of it sounds like me. They overslept. So we make that up by learning all night, but you don't have to learn all night. There's I know, for example, at Or Aron, Rabbi Yoel Smith used to, at about 12:15, say, guys, I'm leaving now. If you want to stay, you can stay, but I need to get up for Shachrit and Musaf. And that's Deraisa. So don't let minhags hijack Deraisa.
The Rabbi Landau from Automatic Savoy stops at somewhere between 1 and, I think also about 1, 1:30 later.
That's what I said to you. I said our generally stop at about 1 o'clock.
He said the same reason what you're saying. He said it's more important that he's there at shul the next morning. It's imperative.
Correct. And then the other reason is that that there's a custom to have a milk meal, is that the halachas on shchita were not given prior to the giving of the Torah. So they ate dairy to be safe until those laws were given. And that's why we carry on the custom. Okay. And on that note, I'm going to start with an interesting subject that we did touch in the Mishnah about Eidim Zomamim, which is conspiring witnesses. Conspiring as opposed to, I have used the word false witness. It's not wrong, but the more accurate term is conspiring, because false means their testimony was inaccurate. Eidim Zomamim, conspiring, means they're intending to do damage to an innocent person. So there's an Amorite discussion about Zomamim witnesses, and it's been stated one who testifies and is subsequently found to be a Zomam witness, which is the singular of Zomamim, meaning a conspiring witness, singular, one witness. A buyer says he is disqualified from serving as a witness retroactively from the moment he testified. I'm going to repeat this again because this is imperative for argument coming up. A buyer, A-B-A-Y-E, says there's always a buyer and Rava. They're both Amorians. Okay? So a buyer said he is disqualified from serving as a witness retroactively from the moment he testifies. Okay, so what does this actually mean? It means, for example, if there were two witnesses that testified in Nisan, and then they were subsequently exposed as Zomamim, conspiring witnesses a month later in Iyar, they become disqualified retroactively from the time they gave their testimony in Nisan. Any other testimony they gave in the interim is therefore also invalidated. Makes sense, guys. It's pretty straightforward.
That's obvious. Yeah, it's straightforward.
Okay. Now, the Gemara explains the grounds for their opinion. Okay. But before they do, they give the contrasting opinion to a buyer, which a buyer is basically saying, listen, at the time that they found to be conspiring witnesses, we struck off the roll their testimony in that case, retroactively from when it started. We also struck off the roll their testimony in any other case, meaning that a person could be a witness to a number of events, not just the trial that they currently found to be conspiring against. So all their testimony is retroactively invalidated from the point that they found to have been lying to the point where they're caught. It doesn't mean going back years. Okay. Now, the Gemara says that Rava has got a different opinion. He said that the Eidim Zomamim, the conspiring witnesses, are disqualified from serving as witnesses only from now. In other words, when he's found to be conspiring onward. Now, that's an interesting point of view, so that any testimony they gave in other cases up until the time they were actually proven to be Zomamim remains valid. Okay? Now, I'm going to discuss what this means, is that obviously you can't say that's necessarily that. I wanted to know if they're involved in other cases. I understand that at that point onwards that their testimony is struck off the roll. But in this case, I'm sure in the actual case that they proved to be Zomamim, you cannot accept their testimony up until retroactively. This is the part I was struggling with, because if they're testifying to somebody committing murder and then they don't happen to be at the scene, you can't say from the testimony from now on it's invalidated. So it's obviously invalidated in that particular case, but this is also talking about other cases that they might have been witness to. So again, Abai is saying the conspiring witness is disqualified from serving as a witness retroactively. In other words, from the time he testified. So if it's found out that he started testifying in more than one case about a month ago, and we found him as a false witness now, it's all struck off the roll, every case he's done. Rav is saying that he's disqualified from serving as a witness only from the point where he's found to be a conspiring witness onward. Okay, now I'm just pausing this a second. Give me 1 sec, guys. All right, guys. All right, so the Gemara explains the grounds for their respective opinions. So Abaye said he's disqualified retroactively, the false witness, because from the moment he testifies, he becomes an evildoer for having testified falsely. And where do we get this from? There's a pasuk, you shall not bear false witness. That's in Shmot, Exodus chapter 20, verse 13. Okay? And the Torah stated, do not place an evildoer as a witness. Okay? So basically, if you violate the prohibition, you shall not bear false witness. Although you've got two zomamim, there are witnesses that say they were present. We don't view the situation as merely their word against the two witnesses who seek to discredit them, right? For it's implicit in the Torah's command to punish a zomamim that we believe the testimony of the second set of witnesses were not at the scene of the alleged crime. This in turn establishes a zomamim has given false testimony, and they are thus established to be evildoers, according to Tosfot. Okay, but if you look at the actual verse, it doesn't say, do not place your hand with an evildoer to be corrupt witness. That's exactly what it says. But there's an oral tradition that says that this verse means to bar the testimony of an evildoer. That's actually what it means. Okay? So, basically, Rava said he's disqualified only from now onward because the discrediting of a zomamim witness is a novelty. It constitutes an exception to the normal rules of evidence. Okay, so guys, can you tell me what a bias says compared to Rava and why? Off?
Who's the least tired? Whoever's the least tired, go for it.
Well, each of you give me a go at it. Give me a go.
Arthur, you want to start? Then I'll go after Gavin, whatever.
I can't do much today. I didn't sleep last night at all. I'll do my best, but I'm bad.
Okay.
Right.
Arthur, you want to try? Then I'll try maybe.
Arthur, you're on mute if you can hear us.
No, he knows he's on mute. He knows very well.
I can hear you perfectly well. I'm just saying no.
All right, so guys, there's just two sentences. I just want you to remember this from the Gemara, okay? Just two sentences. Okay. Sentence number one. A bias says the false and conspiring witnesses is disqualified from serving as a witness retroactively from the moment he testified. So say it's basically January, okay, and we found out that the witness is exposed a month later in end of February. They become disqualified from when they started their testimony in January from not only this case, but every other case that's invalidated. That's a bias. Rava said that the conspiring witness or witnesses are disbarred or ineligible from their testimony being considered from the moment they found to be conspiring witnesses onwards, but nothing previous to that point. Okay, so that's the gist of it. So yeah, there's no issue as far as the bias is concerned because it's easy. It makes sense that you disqualify retroactively because you don't want to go near that person's testimony. It's only dangerous if he's found to be a liar, especially if he wants to do somebody else harm. And where's it from? From the pasuk that says, do not place an evildoer as a witness. Okay? And that's, again, in Shemot chapter 20, verse 13. But we want to know Rava's reason, because Rava is unusual. Why should a witness, Kevin? Why should a witness, Kevin, what's interesting about the ceiling?
I don't know. I've looked at the screen now. I saw from my eyes if I look at the screen the whole time.
No problem. You look like Stevie Wonder.
That's wonderful.
Like this.
Should have come to the Barnyard Theatre. They did a great impression of
They did. Kevin's is
Yours
better.
did quite a good one, Kevin.
Kevin's
you
is
did quite a
better.
good one too.
That's it. That's it.
Kevin's is much better.
That's it. That's exactly it.
It was a wonderful impersonation, Damon.
Yeah, that is. He's looking for the mic. Yeah. Okay. So, there's no difficulty understanding a buyer, but there's a difficulty, Kevin, understanding Rava, because why should the witness only be discredited from the point that he's found out that he's testifying falsely? So we want to know his reason, and he's got a brilliant reason. The discreditation of a zomeim, a witness, is a novelty. It constitutes an exception to the normal rules of evidence. Why, guys? In reality, it makes sense why it's a novelty. There's 2 against 2. What do we mean there's 2 against 2? Is that the first set of witnesses, Arthur, are discredited by, the first 2 witnesses are discredited by how many witnesses?
2.
Okay, 2, right. So if myself and Gavin have a testimony against 2 other witnesses, and there's 2 on 2, what do you think should happen? Well, let's take 1 on 1. It's my word against somebody else, and you don't know either party. What happens in 1 on 1? Arth? This you can answer. It's pure logic, and you're logical.
What happens on 1 on 1?
I'm saying
you believe the guy that wasn't. I mean, that's okay. The guy accusing him, you don't believe him. You believe the defender.
No, Arth, it's not true. If you've 2 people you don't know, and they're arguing against each other, what makes one more believable than the other?
Nothing.
Or 2 against 2?
Nothing.
Nothing. Exactly.
You've got no idea if those guys that come to you and say the guys were in Cape Town instead of Durban, whether they're telling the truth. You don't know. Correct.
That's exactly it. So Kevin, the minute there's an even number of witnesses against each other, they can't be believed. They cancel each other out. And this is an argument against Islam and Christianity. Okay, because if you've got different religions, and there's only meant to be one truth, but other religions, even according to some atheists that feel this way about Judaism or religion in general, if there's meant to be, there can only be one truth. If you've got conflicting opinions on an event, they're either all false or one is true. But how do you know which one is true if they're all contradictory information? Very difficult. So what happens is, if there are 2 witnesses that say they saw a theft, and 2 other witnesses said that they viewed the first set of witnesses in Cape Town, they should cancel each other out because it's 2 against 2. But the novelty is we believe the second set of witnesses. And Rava is basically saying, because of this novelty, that's why you can only apply it from the time the novelty takes effect and onward. In other words, from the time the witnesses are exposed as conspiring, okay? Because logically, 2 contradictory testimonies should offset each other. So what rationale is there in believing the second set over the first? And Gavin, this was covered in the 27th daf of Sanhedrin. Same thing with except there it wasn't talking about civil cases, it was talking about murder. But it's exactly the same question that was written there. So there's a scriptural decree from Chumash that constitutes an exception to the ordinary rule of testimony of logic. It's not a logical extension of them. So it has to be applied with a dayu. What's a dayu, Kevin? A dayo?
It's got something to do. It's the opposite of a kal v'chomer.
Exactly. Kal v'chomer seeks
I can't describe. Yeah.
In other words, kal v'chomer means even more so. And what a dayo does is come to constrain it. It places a limitation. So in other words, it's a limitation that you can only apply the law of cancelling out the conspiring witness from the moment the novelty goes into effect, which is when the discrediting witnesses actually testify. In other words, when they were caught out. So any testimony that the false witness, or that's now proven false, gave from the time of their original testimony until they were actually proven to be a conspiring witness remains valid. That's what Rav is saying. And in
Can
fact,
I make a comment?
Yeah, sure.
So I obviously prefer a buyer to Rava because if someone's proof is honest, then generally everything they've ever said in their life is dishonest. Generally, they're a dishonest person. You can't trust them ever. So therefore, you should cancel everything they've ever witnessed to. Whereby somebody who tells the truth always tells the truth. That's generally you don't find somebody who one day tells the truth.
You got a great point. There's a reason why Rava says what he has. Okay, and let me just put it to you like this: is that say somebody's been in two different cases. The one time he witnesses a car accident is just a bystander witness. Okay, and that testimony is going to affect the ability for somebody to have an insurance claim. We're going to deal with this question now, and that's a separate case. The only thing is, in this case, he's not caught to be a conspiring witness. There are two witnesses against two witnesses. So either both are conspiring, two other witnesses say they weren't there, so it's 2 and 2. They should cancel each other out. So it's not proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that this person in fact conspired. We just happen to, because of the scriptural verse, cancel out any testimony they have from now on, which means Rava could apply it that this case is struck off the record, but maybe not another case that they've been involved in, just simply because it's an even number of witnesses against witnesses. So if there's one false witness or conspiring witness and one person saying they're a conspiring witness, that's not evidence that they're a conspiring witness necessarily. It just means it's not evidence.
The likelihood is quite strong.
The likelihood is 50%. We don't know if we believe the other witnesses. And this is my problem. This is my problem with the reciprocal penalties, because I'm agreeing with you. So if that's the case, and we say that the two witnesses offset the other two, why should we apply the reciprocal penalty where if they meant to put somebody to death, they should be put to death on the basis of two other witnesses that 2 offset 2? Why don't we just say the case is thrown out of court and it's a mistrial? That's my question to Rav Simcha now.
Yeah, it's a good question. There's also, I remember, I'll just tell you this very quickly. What's his name? Yosef Mizrahi said, if you're reading a book and the first page of that book says that the Twin Towers was destroyed in Chicago, you're not going to carry on reading that book. It means it's all sheker, the whole book. Same thing here. Once the guy opens up his mouth in a case and it's sheker, then to me everything's sheker. I know that his argument's also strong. I understand that, but I'm just saying. So
you're completely correct if it was 2 witnesses against the 1, or 4 witnesses against the 2, but not when it's 2 against the 2. Who do we believe? That's what's bugging me about the reciprocal punishment. I would agree with you. I believe them. There should be a mistrial completely.
Yeah, there should be a mistrial. Yeah.
But why would you give him a reciprocal penalty based on 2 offsetting 2?
Yeah, because the second 2 could be lying, and then you put the first one to death.
Correct.
Not fair. The first 2.
So that's my big issue on this point. But Rava's got another explanation which is brilliant. Okay, and I'm just going to go through this a sec. Okay. Another rationale for Rava's opinion. There are those who say Rava also agrees with the Bai who said that the Zoy Maim witness is really disqualified retroactively from the moment he testified. So actually, Gavin, there's another opinion that concurs with you in the Gemara that says Rava actually agrees with the buyer in that particular case, that the witness is disqualified retroactively from the moment he testified. In other words, retroactively, anything he said in that trial is thrown out. It's like invalidated. And we use the word one witness because we don't talk about the reciprocal penalty. We're just talking about the one Zomaim witness, because that's what's spoken about in our Mishnah too. But Rava's got a different reason why he becomes disqualified from now onward, and that's the following. He's saying not in this case, but it's because of concern for the loss of purchasers who become unaware of his disqualification, used him as a witness on their documents. In other words, this case, Rava is agreeing with the buyer according to the second version, but he's saying that maybe if we were disqualified this witness retroactively from all cases he's done up until that point, okay, then any bill of sale witnessed by him between the time he testified falsely and the time he was exposed as a conspiring witness would be invalidated. So if you had a case where there would be a buyer and a seller and he was just the witness, the buyer would have no way of proving that he indeed brought the property. And that's not the fault of the buyer, it's saying here. How was he to know the witness would be disqualified retroactively in a different case? It's also discussed in Sanhedrin. Therefore, to protect purchasers, the rabbis enacted their own discretionary halacha, which they can do, that a zomaim witness, a single witness, be disqualified only from the time he is actually exposed and onwards. So clearly this rabbinic enactment would apply only to monetary cases, where the rabbis can circumvent biblical law, right? Because they've got a special power to deprive people of their property and assign it to others. But with respect to non-monetary cases, like in Sanhedrin in the 27th daf, for capital cases, or in cases of marriage and divorce, the biblical law disqualifying a zomim witness retroactively would still remain in effect, according to this explanation of Rava. Okay? And even according to Tosfot, it's evident that the rabbinic enactment would at least apply to all monetary cases, not just purchases, but this particular case would be thrown out. Like,
Damon, can you please repeat the last point?
All right, so we don't have any difficulty with the buyer, Kev, because a buyer uses the word that it's an evildoer if you conspire to have an innocent Jew convicted by your testimony. Okay? And that's pretty straightforward. I mean, that's not a difficulty. That's in Shmot, Exodus chapter 20, verse 13. Okay, you shall not bear false witness. So he's saying when a person's proven to be false, there's no question that retroactively you cancel out all their testimony. There's no question. Rava says you can only cancel their testimony from now on. Now, when you first look at it, you think it doesn't make sense. As Gavin said, the guy's proved to be a liar. So, like, how can you do that? So then there's two explanations here for Rava's opinion. The first explanation is that generally when you've got a witness against a witness, okay, or two witnesses against two witnesses, they cancel each other out because we don't know who to believe. But according to the scriptural verse, we believe the second set of witnesses, okay? But that's not logic, okay? That's not logic at all. What we're actually doing is it comes from the verse in Devarim, Deuteronomy chapter 19, verse 18, that discusses actually a single witness. And what happens is you actually... there's an oral tradition that the verse means to bar the testimony of an evildoer, because it's implicit in the testimony of the first witness says that they were present at the scene of the incident. Okay, so logically, if a second group of witnesses comes across and says that they weren't there, they should offset each other. Why do we believe the second ones as opposed to the first? We don't know who's lying. So there's no rationale for necessarily believing the second set over the first. But since it's a scriptural decree from the Chumash, that constitutes an exception to the ordinary rule of testimony. It's not a logical extension of it, Kevin. Therefore, what's implied with a dayu, a limitation, and that limitation is only from the moment the novelty goes into effect, that we listen to the second witness or the second set of witnesses, when it's 2 against 2 or 1 against 1, that the discrediting witnesses actually testify. And when discrediting witnesses saying that the first ones couldn't have been where they were, we say, okay, at that point, any testimony that the first set of witnesses gave, from now on, it's excluded, but we can't apply it for all the testimony they've done up until now, because how do we necessarily know that the second set are telling the truth? We're just saying, okay, there seems to be a question, so from now on, there's a problem. And then I said to Gavin, I'm bothered by the same point, and if it's so serious, why don't they create a mistrial? Why give a reciprocal penalty for the Eidim Zomamim? Because if it's 2 cancelling out 2, to give these 2 false witnesses that are accusing somebody of murder the death penalty on this sort of basis is a little bit hectic. I would create a mistrial, especially if Rabbi says, well, you can only discredit the testimony from now on. So that's the first explanation of Rabbi's reason. There's a second explanation, Kevin. This is important. And that second explanation is that he agrees with the buyer, according to the second opinion, that we retroactively cancel the testimony of these conspiring witnesses. Because even if there's a chance, as Gavin says, that they could be right, the second set of witnesses, we don't want to take a chance. So then we create a mistrial, and any sort of testimony that they've given from when this process started, that testimony is also thrown out of court. But again, my question arises, why should they get a reciprocal penalty when we don't know if in fact the second set of witnesses are correct, because it's 2 against 2? It is a bit of a question that still remains. But according to Rab's second opinion of his explanation, even though he agrees with Rab, with the buyer, he says you've got to only limit it to this case where the second set of witnesses said that they witnessed the first set of witnesses in their particular city, being a different city. So this case is thrown out of court, but not other cases that witness might have appeared in. Why? Because we said, what about the case, like at all monetary cases, but maybe a case where somebody, there's a buyer and a seller for a house. Okay? Now the buyer's paid money and he's got a shtara document with a deed and a set of witnesses. Now, if that witness is thrown out of court, all the testimony is given in other cases retroactively, all of a sudden the buyer's got no valid proof that he's paid for the property. This isn't his fault. How does he know that one of the witnesses he got to sign the document that might have rented offices below from him? And he said, Boyke, I've known you for years. Come sign this document. I need you as a witness. All of a sudden he loses the house he bought, because this house been implicated in something else. So Rabbi said, that's a problem. It's a problem. In this case, we understand why he's retroactively disqualified, because he was proven in this case to be in a different city, enough to create a doubt. Not enough that 2 doesn't cancel out 2, and we go with the scriptural verse, it's still a novelty, but in the other case, it's not thrown out. Now, the Gemara wants to say, well, then what is the implication of the 2 opinions of Rava? The one saying that because it's a novelty, we can't retroactively disqualify the testimony of the Eidim Zomamim, because it's 2 witnesses against 2. So according to this new opinion, that Rabba actually does agree with the buyer. In this case, it's all thrown out even retroactively. But in a case of monetary cases, in another case, it's not thrown out because it's going to upset all the other cases, and they haven't proved conclusively that the Eidim Zomamim. because it's 2 witnesses against 2, right? So in that particular case, what is the implication between these 2 different opinions? And I'll tell you what that is now. Okay, so what's the practical difference between these 2 explanations of Rava's view? Okay, so the Gemara could have actually quite simply said that there's a difference in regard to non-monetary cases, right? But the Gemara wants to find the differences that apply even to monetary cases. Okay, so this is interesting. Alternatively, where the second set disqualifies the first set on the basis of them having committed a robbery. Okay, so what happens is there was a second set of witnesses in Cape Town, and they witnessed this first set of witnesses a murder in Johannesburg. Okay, now the second set of witnesses didn't say that these 2 witnesses from Cape Town didn't happen to have an event where they were coming for a wedding in Johannesburg and they were there at the time. They're not invalidating the fact that they went to Johannesburg for a wedding and happened to witness a murder once they came back to the pothole-ridden city of Johannesburg. What they've said is that these 2 witnesses in Cape Town were from the Cape Flats, and they had a hobby of armed robbery. Now, when they're accused of armed robbery, they are disqualified as witnesses. It's not the same thing as being accused of conspiring witnesses. So then, in that particular case, it's not a novelty. In other words, you can, if you hold by the opinion that Rava says in the first case that it's a novelty, and that's why we only apply the cancellation or disqualification of their testimony from now on. Because 2 witnesses against 2, in the case of them, obviously, the second set stating the first set weren't at that given event, it's not a novelty anymore that 2 against 2 means we still believe the second set of witnesses. So in a case where a second set is testifying to them being armed robbers, they're not allowed to be witnesses, and therefore, retroactively, any testimony they're given is thrown out of court. They can't be witnesses, finished. So that's one implication. Okay? Now, the second, now, there's another case. Now, the other case is when the first, okay, so if you've got 2 witnesses testifying against one of the original witnesses and 2 other witnesses testify against the other one. So we're saying, for example, you take a case of Reuven and Shimon. I don't want to use our names. They testify to an alleged incident, right? Subsequently, there were 2 witnesses in Kabb testified that Reuben was with them somewhere else at the time. And then 2 other witnesses testified that Shimon was with them else at the time. So since in each case 2 witnesses are testifying against one, there's no novelty in believing the latter witnesses. For 2 witnesses are always believed against one. That's according to Rashi. According to Tosfot, who asked that even when 2 witnesses testify that Reuben was with them somewhere else at the time of the alleged incident, they are being contradicted by 2 witnesses. Because Reuben is saying that he was present, and Shimon is saying he was there with him. So how do you answer that question? Tosfot's answer is that the Gemara is speaking in the case where Reuben and Shimon each said nothing about the other. They don't say they were with each other at an event and witnessed it. Each one of those witnesses claimed to have seen the incident, the one from his office window and the other one from the guy's apartment. So they're not testifying that they saw it together. And therefore, if there's 2 witnesses against the one and 2 witnesses against the other, it's not like the 2 witnesses are backing each other up. They're not claiming that they were together, so it's 2 against 2. That's Tosfot's explanation. But either way, 2 against 1 is not a novelty. So therefore, we can apply the retroactive disqualification of the testimony when the second set of witnesses don't deny the first set of witnesses were at that location, but said, listen, these guys are armed robbers. They can't be qualified as a witness. In that case, again, there's no novelty because they're disqualified. It's not saying, how can 2 against 2 not cancel each other out and we believe the second ones? So in that particular case, we cancel their testimony retroactively. Okay. So that's what makes sense. So in each of those situations, according to the version that said that Rava's reason for not considering a disqualification of a witness retroactively is because that disqualification is a novelty, meaning that 2 against 2 don't cancel each other out. That rationale doesn't apply in these cases. So Rava would agree that the first witnesses are disqualified retroactively. But according to this latest version of Rava that we learned, that the reason for not disqualifying, oh, sorry guys, I'm a bit hypoglycemic, for not disqualifying a conspiring witness is because we're concerned that maybe it would be a loss to purchasers, or they've been witness in another monetary case and people would lose out financially. That rationale is applicable to these cases as well. So then in that particular case, Rava would rule that even in those cases, the first witnesses are not disqualified retroactively. Do you understand what we're saying here or not? If you don't, I can explain it.
They cancelled retroactively because they made false. They made a false statement.
Okay, I'm going to ask Arthur a question because I love you, mate. I show my love in unusual ways. But
I can tell. I appreciate it.
What I'm saying is, what are the 2 opinions of why Rava disqualifies retroactively?
You're talking about Rava, you're talking about Abaya and Rava or just Rava?
No. Abaya is no question. He says retroactively.
I know him. Abaya is retroactive all the way.
All the way.
Yeah. Where
Rava
doesn't. Rava says only from just that time.
Correct. From that time where they're proven to be a false witness. What are the 2 opinions of Rava's reason?
Well, the one I understood there was if he had, for example, gone into a witness of a business deal, like property or whatever, and suddenly that guy had got into trouble, it means that you're going to lose your shirt because that guy is can no longer be a witness.
Excellent.
You're buying their property.
Perfect. Excellent. So that's exactly what we're saying is that say you've got somebody at the shul and you've got a business transaction with 2 guys and they say, listen, I'm selling my car to such and such and he's given me the money or whatever. And now all of a sudden one of the guys at the shul has been involved in a separate case in the magistrate's court where he's proved that his testimony has been possibly false. And I'm saying possibly, Gavin, because it's an even number of opinions against each other. That witness in that case turns around and says, listen, I've witnessed it. And the other guy said, no, you didn't. You were with me. We don't know who to believe. That's why it's a novelty. So in the case of in Arthur's case, we don't want somebody in a separate legal case to be one witness short and then their whole transaction falls apart. That's excellent. And what's the first reason? I've just mentioned it.
Okay. The first reason is okay. What is the first reason? I don't know what the first reason is. I can't think.
Okay, Kev, what's the
I remember
first
the second reason.
Perfect, you did good, mate.
Huh?
What's the second reason, Kev? Or what's the first reason? All right, explain to me this concept of a novelty. Gavin, I know you know from the question you asked me. Kevin, what's a novelty here? What's rubber?
It's something you experience for the first time, and then it wears off. It's not such first few times you experience it. Yeah.
Correct.
Oh,
So
like marriage.
Yeah, it starts off as a word and ends off as a sentence. That's true.
Yeah. Love sentence.
Yeah, that's very clever. Nice
So,
one, Dan.
Kevin, what we're saying here is it is a novelty. It's, in other words, it's a surprise. You're right. What we learned here was a surprise, but what is the surprise we've learned? That's what I want you to explain to us.
About that say that the second set of witnesses can be disqualified.
No, you're almost there. Try it again. You're almost there. Okay, let me start off. What happens in Adam Zomimim? How do we know they're conspiring witnesses? What happens? That's what. Let me ask you that first question, Kev.
If they found generally
able to answer it too. So, what, Kevin? What's the sequence of seeing somebody as a conspiring witness or conspiring witnesses? How does that happen?
Because they made false. What about them?
Well, how do we know they made false? What's the situation?
Because someone could disprove. They said someone was in a certain town and they weren't. They were in another town. They were witnesses to prove to the contrary.
So, how many witnesses are needed for us to accept their testimony in the first place? Okay.
2.
Correct.
Is it 2?
Excellent. 2. One witness doesn't convict anybody. 2. You need 2. That's right. How many witnesses do you need to discredit those witnesses?
Also 2.
Correct. 2. You got 2 witnesses to convict and 2 witnesses to discredit the first pair of witnesses. So fine. What happens if you got 2 people of the second set that are saying these first set of witnesses were in Cape Town on the beach, and the first set of witnesses that say they were in Joburg witnessing this robbery, this murder, they were witnessing. What happens then?
Say that again, please.
The first set of witnesses say that they saw this person murder this other person in Parktown. The first 2 set of witnesses. Then a second set of witnesses say that they couldn't be because they're Cape Townians and they were all at a bra function on the beach together. What happens then?
It's thrown out because it's not the same
city.
Yeah, doesn't add up.
Okay, so this correct. So this is the novelty. Why would we believe the second set of witnesses, Arthur, over the first set? Because it's 2 people testifying against 2 people. If there's an even number of people, if Joe's testifying against John, why would we believe Joe against John? That's why you call witnesses in the first place, because you need evidence. Because it's his word against her word. What do you think marriage counselors do? You know what marriage counselors do? No. I'm saying the wife is complaining about the husband. The husband's complaining about the wife. Now, they're both probably right from their point of view. And my grandmother used to say to me, the truth is somewhere in the middle. He's not 100% right. She's not 100% right. He's not 100% wrong. She's not. They both are wrong and they're both right. The truth is somewhere in the middle. So when you've got 2 witnesses against 2 witnesses, we cannot believe, Kevin, this is the novelty, 2 against 2 or 1 against 1, because they should cancel each other out. Why should we believe the second pair over the first? So the novelties we do because of that verse in the Chumash, Deuteronomy chapter 18, verse 18 and 19. And since that is the case, we say that is the novelty, because logic wouldn't dictate that. And therefore there's a limited way it's applied, and that means it's applied in the fact only from now on there's doubt as to whether what they're saying is correct. but we can't automatically strike off the record anything they've said up until this point, because it's not a foregone conclusion that the second witnesses aren't lying. And therefore, my question asserts itself: why would the Edom Zomimim get reciprocal punishment if it's 2 against 2 and by logic they should cancel each other out? Then just declare a mistrial. Why give them a reciprocal punishment, especially if it's something like death?
True.
That's a bit hectic.
Very hectic.
So what we're saying is, if you want to say that Rava's grounds for basically only applying the principle in a limited way from now on, because 2 against 2 should cancel each other out, and we believe that they could be conspiring witnesses by believing the second set, then we can only apply it from now on, but not retroactively for everything they've done until now. Then that has an implication. Okay, just give me 1 second, guys.
Every day.
All right, guys, sorry
Both
about that.
ways.
So what we're saying is, Kevin, if you want to hold by Rabba's second explanation, that the reason he's doing it is he doesn't basically want to cost purchasers money or anybody in financial transaction, because it's going to damage their cases as well. And we don't retroactively disqualify them from other cases. It doesn't mean that he doesn't agree with the buyer in the fact that in this case, all the testimony is struck off the roll. And we apply the reciprocal penalty. So that has an implication in 2 cases. Okay? And this is important to know. If you want to say it's a novelty because 2 against 2 should cancel each other out and it doesn't, but we apply only they're not listening to the testimony from now on, but would cancel out a case when the second set of witnesses didn't disqualify them as being in a different place, but rather said these guys are habitual bank robbers. So therefore their testimony is not allowed, or they addicts and gamblers. A professional gambler cannot be a witness because he's not to be believed. He might have a wager on it or have an outcome that, or somebody that owes the person money and is quite happy if they don't have to pay the 200 grand back because the guy's swinging from a rope. So anything that could cancel the guy out as a witness, not that he's falsely testifying in this case, but he's got a discreditable character. Okay, that makes sense. It's not 2 against 2. They're not saying that he wasn't there. They say, look at this guy's track record. He's a thief, man. He's a bank robber. So therefore, it's not a novelty that can be checked out. So since it's not a novelty, any testimony that robbers give or a robber gives retroactively is cancelled in all cases. Okay? If you want to hold by the first opinion. But if you hold by Rava's second opinion, that the reason being is we don't want to cost any other cases money financially because they're not involved, then it's a different case. Then we can apply the fact that there's no retroactive cancellation. But then you have to hold the second case, because if you want to hold it because of the novelty, it would affect all cases. If you want to hold it because we don't want to damage other cases because they're innocent, then that's a different case. If we also take a case, Kevin, that one of the witnesses, 2 witnesses say that one of the witnesses was with them, it's 2 against 1. Again, no novelty, we believe them. And therefore, that particular witness is, you can retroactively cancel all his testimony in every case because it's not a novelty. So there's no dial, there's no constraint. It's not applied in a limited way. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And even if there are 2 witnesses against one and another 2 witnesses against another, it's still outweighing them because it's not like Shimon and Reuven are saying that they've been together. It's saying that, the one guy viewed it out of his apartment window, the other one out of his office window. They're not corroborating that they saw it together. So if 2 witnesses come against the one, that one witness is cancelled out. There might not be a reciprocal punishment because you need both witnesses to be zomamim, but we certainly disqualifies testimony. Okay, so that's the difference. If you apply Rava's second opinion to protect purchases, which means retroactively in this case, we throw everything out, except in other cases where it could have just been what do you call it, witnessing to a signature, let's say, Arthur, exactly as Arthur said. Okay, so we're almost done. But so what we say is as follows. What are the practical differences between these two explanations of Rava's view? The first is where two witnesses testify against one of the original witnesses and two other witnesses testify against the other one. Where the second, so that's easy, two against one, there's no novelty, so it's retroactive disqualification. Or where the second set disqualifies the first set on the basis of them having committed a robbery. In each of these situations, according to the version that says that Rava's reason for not disqualifying a Zumaim witness retroactively is because such disqualification is a novelty, and that's why we don't retroactively apply it. That rationale does not apply in these cases. However, Rava would agree that the first witnesses are disqualified retroactively. But according to the version that says Rava's reason for not disqualifying a Zumaim witness retroactively is because, as Arthur explained, of the concern for the loss of purchases or any other financial transaction in a different case, that rationale is still applicable to these cases as well. So Rava would rule that even in these cases, the first witnesses are not disqualified retroactively off, as you said, because it would cost these other cases money, when in fact somebody might have innocently used a person as a witness in the shul. So the Gemara cites the rulings of some later Amoraim on this matter. Rav Yirmiyah of Difti said Rav Papa acted in the case that came before him in accordance with Rava's ruling. Rav Ashi, however, said the halacha follows a buyer. The Gemara concludes, and the halacha follows a buyer in its disputes with Rava in the 6 disputes indicated in the mnemonic Yud Aleph Lamed Kuf Gimel Mim. So in this case, in all other cases, it follows Rava, but in these 6 cases, including this, we follow a buyer. That Zumaim witnesses are disqualified retroactively. Okay, I've got 8 minutes just to tell you a few. All right, literally, I've just got it, and then we're done. Okay, so these are the cases. The case is abandonment without awareness. The dispute concerns a situation in which an object was lost under conditions in which the owner would ordinarily abandon hope of recovering it. The owner did not abandon hope. He was not yet aware that the object had been lost. A buyer maintains that it's not considered abandonment, and the founder must therefore return it. Rava maintains that it is, and the founder may therefore keep it. And in that case, we go with a buyer. So it's abandonment without awareness. That's the one case. The one is this one in our dispute here with a conspiring witness. The other one was a lechi that stands by itself. The dispute is whether a side post that happens to be standing at the entrance of a mavoy for an Erev can permit carrying on the Sabbath, even though it was not put up for this purpose. In other words, in a Reuven, there's a post there that could work as an Erev, even though it wasn't put there for that purpose. Does it count? So we go according to a buyer, and then there's a dispute in Kedushin that is not given to cohabitation, which means that the validity of an act of Kedushin that does not permit cohabitation between husband and wife. For example, somebody betroths one of 2 sisters, right? But he didn't specify which one. And if he didn't specify which one, he can never cohabit with each of them, with either of them. Why? Because the possibility is that it is his wife's sister, and there's a dispute whether the act of betrothal has any validity. In other words, if he never specified which wife he's marrying, he can't sleep with the other one, and since he never specified, he can't sleep with either. So that goes according to a buy in Kedushin. And then clarification of intention regarding a get. The issue is whether certain statements of a husband can be interpreted as a nullification of the bill of divorce sent to his wife. And then the last one is a renegade who eats unslaughtered meat in defiance of the Torah. The dispute is whether somebody eats non-kosher food for personal gain or pleasure. Not for personal gain or pleasure, but simply in defiance of the Torah's law, may serve as a witness. In those 6 cases, the halacha follows Abaya. In all other disputes in Shas between Abaya and Rava, the halacha follows Rava. Okay, so Kevin, we're done. That was 3 minutes.
Yeah.
All right, listen, we're not doing a shiur tomorrow. I know you're worn out, but we're done. We're done.
Thank you.
Shkach, you did it, yeah.
All right, guys, there's no shiur tomorrow. I'm sorry, Kevin.
You're sorry that there's no shiur tomorrow, you're just sorry